presentation with regards to the preliminary engineering study for the Lake George Dam. Mr. Repay.
Yeah, so I see.
Multiple engineering companies.
Well, we had 3 submittals and both paired up with partnering engineering because I think they have specialties in both. And I know Brad has personally done the hydraulic work near this dam. And you guys that have been on here for a while show that, remember when the railroad track showed a 3 to 4 foot head differential from upstream downstream. So Brad is familiar with that. Brad and SEH, along with DLZ, who they partnered with, have been working on this engineering report. And then hopefully after the report, we'll know what the next phase will be, as far as if you want to continue on and go with their preferred design or just leave it as it is. So with that, Brad, I'll let you do your presentation. You can share your screen.
Okay, my screen pulled up. Okay, I assume you're able to see my screen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have just a short presentation overview on kind of our project and our results. So like Dan mentioned, we teamed with DLZ on the project. SEH kind of did the hydraulics, the dam rock riffle layout, and DLZ did some of the siting, some of the landscape architecture and fitting it into the surrounding community, the surrounding park, and the bridge portion. So just a really quick, I know you're all aware, Hobart Dam was, it's been modified over the years, but it's a high hazard dam originally built in the mid 1800s. Has a fairly large drainage area of 124 square miles, pretty big lake area, and impounds a fair amount of water. So, kind of the challenge or really what we found was the existing structure is a high hazard structure. It's aging. It requires, ongoing maintenance and, operational intervention to maintain its function. And it results in some, contributes to upstream flooding and or elevated water surfaces during larger events, primarily due to the spillway width and the higher overtopping spillway. It's a barrier to fish passage. It basically completely blocks aquatic organism movement upstream to the deep river. And the other one is just a structure presents some safety concerns and limits recreational use of the riverfront area. And just some project objectives, high level, really looking to improve the hydraulic performance of the dam, knowing we have to maintain the court-ordered lake level of 601 and just over 601.9, while looking to reduce upstream flood elevations during those larger events. We also look to restore fish passage and expand, recreational navigation through the deep river corridor. Can we come up with a solution that potentially allows, canoes or kayaks to traverse the dam? And another objective we're looking for is to provide an ADA compliant pedestrian bridge, with improved trail connectivity in the area. So looking to allow, to traverse the area a little bit easier than what's out there now. And then looking to really develop a durable and maintainable design with a community supported riverfront concept that the city can maintain in the long term. And just some alternatives we evaluated. One, of course, is no action, do nothing. It does not really address the safety or upstream flooding concerns, continued high maintenance burden, and little to no improvement on fish passage. And then, so we screened out the no action. We also screened out a traditional rehab. And, and really what that would be is kind of continuing on like you've been with some projects as needed, but really, what we found in some of this is there's, the rigid structural elements are sensitive to settlement. So if an improvement looks to expand outside the existing dam footprint, the ground surrounding the dam will, will limit some of that or will really make it much more costly. So it'd be extensive ground improvement would be required, and it would really be it'd be a higher risk due to the soft underlying compressible soils. So where we arrived at the preferred alternative was, we call it a naturalized rock riffle, and I'll kind of get into a little bit more what that means in the following slides. But really what it is, it's a rock fill ramp that, you know, will be allowed to tolerate some more localized settlement. It will improve both conveyance upstream, lower the upstream flood elevations, allow for fish passage, and also look to support recreation and long-term durability. So essentially we'd be looking to replace the existing dam structure with a large rock ramp. So again, we call it a naturalized rock riffle system with integrated pedestrian bridge. So it's basically would be a long, and you can kind of see in the background there, a long rock rapid section that's basically built out of rock and various levels of rock and filter stone with large boulders on the top. And, you know, and due to some of the sheet pile would be utilized to help establish grade control due to some of the soft soils in the area, and it would help with long-term stability. And we'd really be looking to also include a ADA compliant pedestrian bridge with integrated viewing opportunities. And as part of this project, really what comes in versus the traditional dam too that I didn't mention earlier is looking for some bank stabilization downstream of the dam. Some of those banks right now are heavily eroded and, you know, on the verge of some stability issues. So we'd also look for bank stabilization, some restoration plantings, and really some allowing more use of the riverfront space downstream of the dam. While doing this, all while, you know, again, maintaining that court established lake level elevation without the use of gates or any other person induced activities or required activities, I should say. And then just some highlights on the hydraulic performance. With the dam modifications, you know, just with the dam alone, we'd be, you know, we could get about just over half a foot decrease in the 100-year water surface elevation upstream of the dam. So basically the Lake George would fluctuate less during the 100-year and even lower than that during more frequent events. And then the other thing we looked at with the project is what happens if we modify the dam and also look to widen or reduce the restriction at the existing ridge road downstream. And if those two are combined, we could get up to about a foot decrease through Lake George as part of the project. And we did this both with some one-dimensional and two-dimensional HEC-RAS modeling. We looked at flow velocities, which would be low enough to provide fish passage through the dam itself. And the high velocity areas with this concept would be concentrated in the center of the channel. So it would help to stabilize those existing eroded banks downstream. Okay. And then this one, there's a lot on this slide, but really what I want to, again, point out is there's very soft and compressible soils in the area, and there will be going forward. So there's a lot of what we call marl soils near the dam toe with very low bearing capacity. So with this, we're expecting a fair amount of settlement, you know, with a rock rapid system. But that's kind of the key of this, is that it's constructed such that we can allow that settlement to not impact the function of the project itself. So why the rock riffle works, it does not assume a zero sediment foundation. It's designed to tolerate differential settlement. You know, and we look to distribute the rock mass across those soft soils. We use sheet pile to help contain grade control and kind of the deformation of that rock, and really look to stage it such that, you know, limiting the loads and while maintaining hydraulic control at all times. But really and why I have kind of the yield sign or the warning sign is what we found as part of this is we're able to use some of the soils information from the construction of the existing dam, but there really needs to be more soils investigations before we can really nail down kind of the ultimate feasibility and cost of a project like this moving forward. And then, of course, as you're probably aware of, there's a fair amount of environmental permitting that would go along with this, with permits required from the core Chicago district, state of Indiana, both the IDEM and the divisions of water. So agency coordination will be key on whatever project, as a project moves forward early and often to make sure we get ahead of any potential path or roadblocks there. And again, we'd be looking to, this would be more of an aquatic habitat restoration and bank stabilization project. And then just some high level, how would we build this? So we'd look to basically establish confinement. We just, sheet pile cut off upstream, down the middle of the stream potentially, and build it one half at a time. And probably starting on the south side where the existing dam spillway isn't, where the emergency spillway is, fill that a little bit at a time to account for the settlement. Once that side, you flip to the other side, fill the north side, and then kind of open it all at once and put in the larger rock boulders to, to kind of set the path of how we want the water to flow down the channel. And that's kind of what I talk about in the final placement there. And then here's kind of what we outlined as the path forward on a project such as this. And you'll note I have agency coordination, permitting, and for that, depending on other things, I think the first step is definitely we need some more geotechnical information to figure out how bad are these soft marl soils, and how do we stage construction, stage the design to deal with those. So that's our recommended first path. Again, looking to the second one to be confirm our performance criteria, and that's primarily to how can we design this to acceptable deformation limits while still achieving the hydraulic performance we want. Then, of course, final plans and specs design that, and 3 and 4 will be key. 4 will be early on because there's a fair amount of permitting and maybe even some FEMA letters of map revision necessary prior to construction. And then, of course, moving forward, it'd be once the permits are secured, bidding, construction, and completion. And a lot of this will be largely in water construction. So that is a high level overview of how we foresee the project. And I do have, I can just show you another excerpt from kind of showing a high level overview of that's kind of how we envision it looking. Is the existing dam now, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but is essentially here. We would be looking to build a lot of at least the upstream portion of the dam nearest to the existing dam, because that area has already been basically compacted because the dam's been there so long. So that is the concept we're looking at. We call the preferred alternative as part of this.
Is that it, sir?
Yes, that is it.
Because I didn't see you bow or anything, so I just wanted to make sure. Mr. Repay,
I can do that.
Close this up and help us what we're doing. Just some context while Dan stands up is that Deep River is one of 2 primary tributaries into the Little Cal. All the water going into Hobart Lake George comes all the way from south of Crown Point, Cherville, Maryville, all the places that they're building new stuff. All that water goes into that particular lake. The second one being Hart Ditch that runs along the west side of the watershed. Go ahead, Mr. Repay. It sounds like a big project.
Well, it is, and it's there's been a lot of emphasis on Deep River. We first did that with the railroad. Hobart has taken the initiative on 3rd Street in Wisconsin, rebuilding those. If you remember way back when we did this initial model, Brad, I think you did it, where we saw the impediments to water flow. And so the natural progression is to do, the dam, and then after the dam, in my opinion, is also, and I don't think Brad even talked about it, was the railroad tracks that are even south of that. So there's another set of railroad tracks that runs just to the south of the city hall that is, I mean, the opening, I don't know the exact opening, but it's not very large. And so you want to prepare everything downstream. So when you do open that railroad bridge, I mean, that's could be the cause of why we see problems on Turkey Creek and why we see stuff on Niles Ditch, all trying to compete for that same space. And this part has always been an issue for us, but also the city of Hobart, where they see it as a safety concern. They see it as a better opportunity for the ecological aspects of it and safety. I mean, if you've ever gone out there to see, and I was out there today, you know, the trees that get stuck in that dam, it's just, it's a constant maintenance nightmare. So I think the next step, as Brad pointed out, is that we do, at least before we get into design, is at least see what the geotechnical work shows us, and then we can go from there. Would that be correct, Brad, in your opinion?
Yes, yes.
Is there any other funding sources other than Hobart and the Little Cal that are a possibility for something of this magnitude? I mean, we have to get 73 different permits. Is any of those governmental entities willing to kick in some money?
You know, Dan, maybe you could, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is something that has came across my mind, that, you know, they look for aquatic organism passage and restoration type projects. So that might be a potential.
You may have a board member that has more knowledge about that information than me.
Is Hobart doing the point on this, or is the Little Cal doing the point on this?
Who's taking the point?
Yes.
We are. Currently, we are. We were the ones that selected Brad.
Yeah.
So we're the point right now. We don't know. We haven't gotten to the point of whether we're gonna do construction. I think, as I said, the next step is the geotechnical work that needs to be done. After that, if that shows out, then you go into whether you want to design something. When you talk about funding, our new commission member, Jenny, might have some information on that, and some opportunities. I'm not going to speak for her, but.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not asking her right now. I'm just curious as if we're exploring that as a possibility as a part of all this work.
Yeah.
So, and thanks for the presentation. And through your analysis, I guess, and you're saying that the geotechnical information will be forthcoming, or that's the next steps. Did your team look at potential rough order magnitudes, conceptual costs for the design that you prepared based upon?
Yes, we do have some high level, and there was, of course, at this level, we threw a lot of contingencies on there. So that was why we really didn't present them in the report, because it's highly contingent on what we find in the soils. But yes, we do have a, you know, and I would say it's a conceptual level estimate.
That's what I'm asking for, a rough order magnitude or conceptual cost.
You know, and we broke it out by the riffle itself, the ped bridge. And so if I were to, without contingencies and without engineering and things like that, it's probably $8 to $10 million for the riffle. And then the ped bridge, maybe you know, depending on how fancy, but a $4 million ped bridge. So those are kind of the rough order of magnitude, I would say.
And then earlier in your presentation, you presented four variables. You said to mitigate some risk for existing structures. Is there any evidence of that right now, based upon the soil types that are out there now that you've seen?
Oh, the risk with expanding the dam, you know, so really what that comes down to, you know, the dam's been there since 1850, so any settlement would have already been accounted for. But once we get outside that footprint, so if you were to say modify and put in a dam with a bigger spillway or something like that, is really what we're getting at. When you do a rigid structure, the settlement or the soft soils really are going to come into play in that, you know, settlement. You know, a concrete structure doesn't take the settlement like, say, a rock ramp would, where it would, you know, differential settlement isn't going to impact the performance. But that's what that's where we're getting at with kind of the risk of rebuilding or building another dam structure.
Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah.
On one of those slides, it said something about Ridge Road. Are you contemplating rebuilding that bridge as part of this package, or that's separate, or?
That was something we didn't include that cost, and it was something we looked at because Ridge Road is another constriction downstream of the dam. So we wanted to see hydraulically, that impacts the potential impacts or the improvement in the water surface drop due to the dam. So we thought, what happens if the dam is improved and at some point in the future, Ridge Road is improved, just to get an order of magnitude of, how that impacts this dam modification. So it's really, when I say we didn't assume that would be done as part of this project, other than, evaluating the hydraulics associated with it.
Hey, Brad, do you happen to have the numbers we talk about the railroad that is south of 3rd Street? What that impact would be upstream of that?
Yes, if that one was totally removed or, wide enough where it didn't impact, that's about a foot lowering, 1 to 1.4 feet lower, and downstream, I have those numbers. Let me grab that. But yeah, so you get a much bigger bang for your buck, by removing the dam or the railroad upstream. So we could really see some significant improvements. And then Ridge Road was only Ridge Road plus the dam. Ridge Road is like another 4/10 we could gain so we'd get close to a foot of decrease if we were to do the dam and Ridge Road, where if it's just the dam, it's about 6/10 of a foot and I'm talking the 100-year lowering.
What do you say about the railroad?
The railroad's about a foot if we were to widen it.
Upstream. But the problem is if you don't have it downstream, you flood Hobart's downtown.
Right.
Which is what happens currently.
The current bridge that's over the Ridge Road Bridge, is there obstructions that?
The old Ridge Road is just narrow. If you expand it, I don't know how much if I think in one of your slides, you show that if there is no Ridge Road there, like if you just took out the bridge entirely, which in essence, you would just build it wider. There's a calculation. I don't know I don't have it.
Let me just, it is, that's where I say it's another 4/10 lower. So basically Ridge Road causes another 4/10 of water surface increase because it does restrict.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could you please look at page 14 and I'm looking at the statements in the report here. If we replace the dam without modifying Ridge Road, we reduce the 100-year elevation by 0.6. Going to the extra cost of removing Ridge Road with the dam being replaced only gains you 0.2.
Above that,
Pardon me?
so it'd be, and I'm looking at the numbers. It's anywhere from 0.8 to 1 foot total.
Yeah, but you're already at 0.6, but just by replacing the dam, and you're only gaining 0.2 or
An additional, correct.
0.2.
That's just for the old Ridge Road.
Just for Ridge Road.
Yeah, so that's why we didn't.
So to me, that seems like pretty costly add without much impact.
That's not a part of that. That's not a
I
part of this.
understand.
Yeah.
And that's to say, if Ridge Road were to come in the future and be updated, that was what we wanted to mainly look at is, if it were sized or made bigger, how much could it help essentially? So like Dan mentioned, you get more bang for your buck by the railroad versus Ridge Road.
That's almost a foot.
By itself.
More.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So dam modifications are great opportunities to meet multiple objectives. and habitat improvements being one of them. At what point in your phase of this design would you consider, consultation on kind of the biotic community, the aquatic habitats, and looking at fish species and introduction of possible invasives and all of that? So.
Yeah, and we do have as part of our team, the SEH side, we did have a aquatic biologist as part of the team. And one of the things, and again, this was more, what is the solution? And then can we, come up with a solution that potentially, velocities would allow fish passage if we wanted? Yes, but like you had kind of alluded to, that can also go the other way. If you don't want a species to pass, they're going to be allowed to pass. So yes, that would have to be early on, because you don't want to, if that is a red flag, yes, we'd rather do that than move down the path of we built the ramp and now we just introduced something you didn't want to upstream. So yes, that should be early on. And we didn't get into that. It was more, configurations and hydraulics, but we have an aquatic or fisheries biologist actually on our team that was consulted and involved, but yeah.
Right.
So Dan, for clarification, and Brad as well, the water leaves Lake George, it goes
Straight down.
to Burns waterway.
Yeah. Orange
Okay, it doesn't go east from there. It doesn't go west from there. Okay.
It doesn't go west from there.
It doesn't
But
go west.
what it does is, and there's going to be some difference of opinion on this, but the faster, and it'll get me in trouble, the faster you get the water out of Deep River, the less pressure you put on the Little Cal, because as we've seen in other hydraulic reports, is
From the west, you're
yeah,
saying.
the water has to stay until Deep River clears. At least gets down to, I will tell you, it's 11 on the Lake Station meter. So at our Lake Station gauge, once it hits 11, then we start to see water start to slowly make its way out of Little Cal.
Okay, and that gauge is at 51, or is it further west?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That gauge is at 51.
No, this one's at Liverpool. The one that we watch is Liverpool. So anything above 11, if that it's just internal, we should probably put a warning out. But at 11, we know that anything above 11 keeps water in Little Cal, roughly. Anything lower than 11, water starts to recede, and you start seeing the gauges at Grant, Burr, Broadway all come down because of it. Because at a point, the water starts heading to the west because the deep tunnel project starts taking the water and starts moving it that way. And we see that all the way up to Burr Street when they start taking water that way.
So the proposed 6-inch to a foot would reduce pressure.
Well, I think it would, it's only 6 to a foot, but I think the next step that this board needs to consider is going after the geotechnical. After the geotechnical, I think Brad could put some better numbers and some ideas and plans together to say, well, his engineering report says now 20 million. And so do you want to pay $20 million for 6 inches or not? That becomes the issue. So I think the next step for us is whether we do the geotechnical, which I'm imagining we will, and then we'll have better information. Brad will have better information, and then we take it from there.
My primary concern is, which it sounds like we're covering, is that we are not introducing a head pressure issue west, which is not the case.
No, it's already hanging out there because there's too much pressure on Deep River for it to do. That's why it fills in off of I-65 and fills in that whole farm field. By Hatcher Park, Marshalltown, it stays there, and that's how INDOT knows when it's high. That's how they work it. Unofficial readings.
Saw that the last person.
Any other questions for this young man?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On your slide section BB, the side elevation from the first rock riffle to the last is about a 9-foot drop overall. And how long of a distance is it from the first to the last rock riffle? 200 foot, 250 foot?
Yeah, and that will be kind of, it's either typically you shoot for a 20 to 1. So anywhere from, again, it would be refined, but 200 to 500 feet. We'd look to tie in, we modified our initial concepts a couple times. Primarily we had the larger riffle starting further upstream initially, but the geotech concerns had us move it downstream where the top riffle is now nearest to the existing dam and cutting from there. But really it would be, we look to get no steeper than 20-1 and tie in before Ridge Road is really kind of what we're looking for. And roughly 2-foot drops at a time is kind of what we'd be looking for, with kind of pools in between. And does that help or make sense?
Yep, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I think it was a great presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Well appreciated.
Thank you.